everyone. I'll start with a story of what happened in 2010 in Delhi, Mayapuri. A radioisotope cobalt 60, which was used for radiation for cancer treatment. It was bought during 1985. So in 2010, they thought it is quite old enough so that they can dispose it off. So they did dispose it off. When they disposed it, can unmute. Those who are not speaking can unmute. Yeah. So, so this radiation, the cobalt which they kept, they thought old enough, they disposed it off, but the half-life of this was not still over. So the activity was still remaining. There was a residual activity remaining. So because of which the people who got exposed had severe radiation injuries. One of them actually died. So these kind of mishaps can happen when you are exposed to this radiation. So with that context, it is essential for us to know there may be plenty of such scenarios. I'm just mentioning one of them. With that background, we'll be studying the radiation and its effect on health and some of the basics. This is one of the common topic for your PG entrance questions also, and as well as in Viva. You may not expect any theory questions in this, but it is good to know, right? We'll be studying what are the uses of radiation, sources, different types of radiation, and units of measurement, the effects, finally the effects, and what can we do for protection of the state. Right? So you also know the history of what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings in Japan. So once the bomb was exploded, the radiation, the radioactive bombs, nuclear bombs, so radioactive radiation was there, which resulted in acute exposure over a large surface area for a large number of people, resulting in large population getting affected by this radiation injury. Not for one generation, that generation, or multiple generation because of the genetic effects. So that itself says the importance of prevention and knowing these things. We unknowingly use the radiation or get exposed to the radiation, the radioactive materials around us in a daily routine, which may be non-medical as well as medical in the healthcare field. We do use that for diagnosis as well as treatment. So, technetium isotope is used, and cobalt is used for a treatment. Right? Cesium is used for treatment. So multiple ways it is used, and iodine is used for both diagnosis as well as the treatment. Non-medical also, we have plenty of such scenarios. What are the sources? There are mainly two sources, natural as well as man-made. Natural sources are cosmic rays, which basically gamma and beta rays, which is nothing but the radiation coming from sun and other planetary bodies. When it reaches the magnetic field of the Earth, they get broken and result into gamma and beta rays. Terrestrial, that is water, soil, earth, the earthly matters have so many isotopes resulting in radiation. Uranium, thorium, radon, and the internal radiation, that is within the body. Carbon, potassium, lead, various isotopes within our body we will have and we will have get exposed to these radiation. So we'll be having large amount of radiation from terrestrial type of radiation. So the radiation which we get exposed, so 80% is from the cosmic and terrestrial radiation, and only around 20% is from other things. That is man-made. As I said, iodine 131, technetium 99M, cobalt, iridium, and the cesium are commonly used man-made isotopes and radiation. This is what is cosmic radiation. So man-made radiation basically arising from tobacco, TV, X-rays, smoke detectors. We think the more development is there, we'll have more exposure to harmful things. So we should be, if you go philosophically, then ideal thing is be natural in everything. So automatically we will have less exposure to anything harmful. It's not just for radiation, anything. Right? To be natural. Similarly, more advancement like smoke detectors and all, unknowingly we will get exposed to the radiation. So, lantern mantles, nuclear medicine, building materials. So these are the man-made exposure to common people. And need not be healthcare workers or any specific occupational group. Medical sources, diagnostics, and nuclear medicine procedures, which I already discussed. These are all the other things. Tobacco, mainly it is polonium-210. Ophthalmic glasses used in eyeglasses, right? Lenses also have, and some of the ceramics have radioisotope. Occupationally, it is basically the radiology, radiation oncology, and the industries which produce these things. And nuclear reactors, nuclear power plants, and research laboratories. All these people get exposed to radiation, occupational radiation. What are the different types of radiation? Basically, we know what is ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. What are non-ionizing radiation? No, yeah, okay. Non-ionizing radiations are microwaves, the waves from mobile, TV, right? Ultraviolet rays, they're all non-ion. Ultraviolet, they're in between, they're in the border. Ionizing are this alpha, beta, gamma rays. See the spectrum. So you can see all these are non-ionizing radiation. This is ionizing radiation. Will start ionizing radiation, ultraviolet radiation, X-rays, gamma rays, beta rays, alpha. So as you go from here this way, okay. So as you go from left hand to right hand side, becomes ionizing. So the penetrating ability is less, but ionizing capacity more. Ionizing capacity. Okay. So as you go from here to here, the ionizing capacity is higher. From penetrating capabilities increases to this direction. Okay. So that's it. You can see the penetrating ability and alpha, beta, gamma rays. So alpha has less penetrating ability. So that is exactly why they are used for smoke detectors. Even smoke, it stops by the smoke. As thin as paper can stop. In beta rays, aluminum will stop, but gamma can only be stopped by lead. Sometimes even thinner lead it can pass us through, so you need a minimum thickness. So that is about the penetrative ability. Ionizing ability is maximum with the alpha, medium with the beta, and minimum with the gamma ray. So that is these are all very commonly you ask in the PG entrance. Right? So this is biohazard symbol. What you can see is biohazard symbol. Accordingly, you'll be able to understand. So this is less biohazard, alpha is more biohazard because of its ionizing ability. Right. So another important thing which we need to know is the unit of radiation. Again, PG entrance, they will be frequently asking the questions related to the equivalent, right? So you need to understand these things. But I will just give a concept. So when it comes to unit of radiation, we measure that in various methods in terms of exposure, in terms of radiation absorbed, how much exposure. There are actually many things. Even intensity of radiation is one thing. It is mainly in terms of Curie and Becquerel. And next thing is exposure. How much exposure radiation gets emitted? Exposure in the sense how much radiation gets emitted. That is conventional unit. It's measured in Röntgen, and SI unit is coulomb per kg. Next thing is we are more bothered about radiation. How much radiation we absorb and how much is emitted. So absorbed is called radiation absorbed dose, also called RAD. Conventional unit is RADs. Nowadays we use gray. And we don't use the RAD, we use gray. So 100 grays equal to 1 rad. 100 gray is equal to 1 rad. And again, when it comes to just absorbed is not sufficient. We are more interested in out of absorbed radiation, how much is causing damage, right? How much is causing damage? So we call it as equivalent dose. Equivalent dose. So we measure equivalent dose in terms of rad into or radiation absorbed dose into the lethality or damaging factor. So that is radiation absorbed dose is multiplied by damaging factor. So usually it is 1 for gamma and beta, and alpha it is 20. So multiply this gray value into 100 will yield a sievert value. So we measure it in sievert. Similarly, 100 sievert is equal to 1 rad. Again, next level is it's not just enough to know about. Please unmute those who are not speaking. Okay. So it's not just enough to know the lethality factor or damaging factor, but also different part of the body have different threshold of getting damaged, right? So tissue factors also play a role. So with this equivalent dose you multiplied by tissue factor, you will get effective, right? So the reproductive organs will have higher damaging factor, tissue factor. So they are more sensitive to these radiation. So they will have higher effective dose. Right. So what are the effects of radiation? Basically, as I said, usually what happens when there is a when cell get exposed to these radiations, there will be a damage. Either this can be a degeneration, or there will be damage which happens will get repaired. Again, the repair can be incomplete or complete repair, and it can be a death also, cell death also. So there can be necrosis. So there can be a degeneration, damage which happens can be repaired. There may be partial repair or incomplete repair. There may be death also. Okay. The incomplete repair usually it mainly affects the nucleus, the DNA material. The DNA material, whatever the bases, ATGC bases are there, they are either single-stranded damage or double-stranded damage. All these mechanisms, there will be damage. Okay. So depending upon incomplete, the recovery, the damage will be there. Right. So what are the factors which determine the effect? It depends on the dose of the radiation. What we discussed already, the dose, radiation dose. The higher the dose, higher the damage. Right? Rate at which they get the exposure. So faster the exposure, the more damage will be there, and different type of damage. Duration. It is a short duration of exposure or long duration. Long duration of exposure will have a different damage, and short duration of exposure will have a different type. The part that is localized exposure or the whole body exposure, accordingly the symptoms, the damages will be different. An area of exposure, part whether it is gamete cells or non-gamete cells, okay, and the area, the whole larger area, small area, right, and distance from the source. So it is basically the inverse square law, right? The larger, longer the distance from the source, lesser is the effect. Closer to the source of radiation, higher is the effect. So far off from the source, lesser effect. Closer to the source, more effect. Okay. So inversely proportional and also square, inverse square. So basically, depending upon the site, somatic and genetic effects will be there, and depending upon the duration and rate of exposure, it will be acute or chronic. Within this somatic exposure, there will be deterministic and stochastic effect. Deterministic is the effect increases with a dose, with a threshold. That means initially there will not be any effect, but after that there will be an effect. So we will have a threshold. That is deterministic effect. Stochastic is there is no threshold. The damage starts from the go, right? So that is stochastic. This is the example. So initially there will not be any effect, and thereafter effect starts. That is deterministic. So this is usually hair loss, cataract, skin injury. So these are the deterministic effects. Even gastrointestinal tract effect in terms of diarrhea and all. So they're all deterministic. In bone marrow the suppression of the bone marrow, decreased cell count, all these things are deterministic. A number of people exposed to the same dose of radiation, such as symptoms appear in 1%. Then that dose is considered to be threshold, right? And this is stochastic. From the word go, it starts. There is no threshold. And it depends on the dose. Okay, so dose, but nothing, no, there is no threshold. Usually cancer, leukemia, and gamete damage, gamete cells damage, all these things are like this. Okay, even single exposure can sometimes cause these things. So usually exposure can be a long duration and short duration. Accordingly, effects will be different. So when acute large dose short duration exposure is there, acute radiation syndrome will be there, which will have skin reactions, redness, radiation erythema, and also GIT effects, systemic effect, opacity of lens and all is a long duration relatively, affect cancer, hereditary. So sometimes even mental retardation, depression sort of symptoms, mental nervous symptoms, all those things can happen. As I said, acute is more related to this bone marrow, skin, GI tract, and other systemic. Right? Acute radiation syndrome is basically if there is a lower dose, it only affects the GIT. GIT is most sensitive part, and next is hematopoietic tissue. Next, sorry, GIT is not most sensitive. This is because of the systemic, maybe the unknown mechanism also. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea syndrome, and the hematopoietic, and then gastrointestinal, and then central. Central system was more resistant to this acute radiation. So these are the symptoms. So there is also an annual limit, especially for those who are occupational exposures. For a whole body, it's like 20 millisievert per year over 5 consecutive years. They also have early retirement. Those working in radiation, radiation oncology, they have early retirement and higher retirement benefits. These things are higher retirement benefits are not there in India, but Western countries have higher retirement occupation like this, and as well as psychiatry. A public exposure for a whole body, it is 1 millisievert per year. Lens, it's 150 millisieverts in a year, and so almost 10 times, 10 to 20 times higher exposure limitations are there for the occupational general public. Pregnant radiation workers after declaration pregnancy, 1 millisievert, it should not be beyond this because they have a effect on the MP. So this is you cannot have a generalized one. So this you can write in the, this may be asked in the teacher entrance question. The limit, how the limit varies with a different organ, exposure to different organ. So as I said, for protection, there are 3 principles, basically time, distance, and shielding principles. So long and short time exposure will avoid the damages. So have a minimal exposure, short time, and distance. Keep yourself far off from the source of origin, and have a shielding, lead shielding always. Have a lead apron, and be in the separate area, shielded area. So that is a basic principle in the occupation. And also have a protective clothing, lead glowing, a lead apron, and also measure it, have a lead badge. so that you can measure the level of exposure to specific badges, radiation badges. Accordingly, you can take offs. So they have extra leaves within a year also, and early retirement and higher retirement. So this is the fume cupboards. So these are the places where these isotopes are kept, more secured environment, so that even if it spills or there will be less exposure for working. So there are certain do's and don'ts for those who, in case of emergency leakage in a occupation. So do's are go indoors, stay inside, switch on the radio, television. So this is in general, not just occupation, but even in general for all when there is an exposure like leakage from the nuclear reactor, so such a places. Just go indoors, stay inside, switch on TV, television. Look out for public announcement, local authority, close doors and windows, cover all food, water, and consume only such covered items. If in open, cover your face, body with wet handkerchief, towel, dhoti, cover everything. That's the basic thing. Send full cooperation with the local authorities. So these are in types of disaster, natural disasters of radiation leakage. You must be aware, especially for those who are living nearby to reactors, nuclear reactor plant. You must be aware of nuclear radiation hazard, discuss nuclear radiation safety among children and members, something like corona pandemic. Don't panic, don't believe in rumors. So this is something similar. Don't stay outside or go outside unnecessarily. As far as possible, avoid water from open well ponds, expose crops and vegetables, food, water, and milk from outside. These are very, very, very difficult, but these things will not stay longer period. It will void off soon, unlike corona pandemic. Do not disobey any instruction. Same, right? So these are the things. Yes, thank you. That's it for today. So this would be last class for you from me, right? In this term, as per the timetable. If you're really interested, we can make one more group and maybe discuss some interesting topics. That's all. Uh, uh, Optional. Maybe we can discuss the MCQs, maybe revision of epidemiology with MCQs and any other things. So that's it. Any doubts you can ask. Yes, any doubts you can ask. No doubts. Okay, if nothing is there, then I'll log out.